The scent of cinnamon and burned sugar filled the small bakery as Felicity Kane scraped the bottom of her last barrel of molasses, finding only dry wood and disappointment staring back at her. She stood there in her flour-dusted apron, auburn hair escaping its pins, knowing that without molasses her business would crumble faster than a poorly made biscuit in the unforgiving heat of Wallace, New Mexico territory. In the summer of 1878, the bell above her shop door chimed as Mrs. Henderson entered, her round face flushed from the morning heat. "Felicity, dear, I do hope you have some of those molasses cookies ready for the church social tomorrow. Reverend Thompson specifically requested them." Felicity forced a smile, wiping her hands on her apron. "I am afraid I have run into a small problem, Mrs. Henderson. My molasses supply has run dry and the general store will not receive another shipment for 3 weeks. Mrs. Henderson's face fell. 3 weeks? But the social is tomorrow. Could you not send someone to Santa Fe? That would take 2 days at minimum, and I would need to close the shop." Felicity felt the familiar weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. Since her father's death from pneumonia the previous winter, the bakery had become her sole means of survival. Every lost sale meant another night wondering if she could make the rent on both the shop and her small room above it. "What about the McAllister Ranch?" Mrs. Henderson suggested, adjusting her bonnet. "I heard Owen McAllister keeps a well-stocked supply house. He trades with merchants from Texas, and sometimes has goods the rest of us cannot get." Felicity had heard of Owen McAllister. Everyone in Wallace knew of him. The rancher had arrived 5 years ago with enough money to purchase the largest spread in the territory, 10,000 acres of rangeland that stretched from the base of the mountains to the river valley. He employed 30 men, ran 3,000 head of cattle, and kept to himself. The few times Felicity had seen him in town, he had been all business, settling accounts at the bank or purchasing equipment at the hardware store. He was a man of few words and fewer smiles, with a reputation for fairness, but also for being as unyielding as the desert rock. "I could not possibly impose on Mr. McAllister," Felicity said, though even as the words left her mouth, she was calculating distances and time. The McAllister Ranch was 8 miles outside of town. She could ride there, make her request, and return before nightfall if she left within the hour. "Nonsense. Owen McAllister is a reasonable man. The worst he can say is no." Mrs. Henderson patted Felicity's arm. "Besides, you have that lovely mare your father left you. Put her to good use." After Mrs. Henderson departed with a promise to spread word that the cookies would be available despite the setback, Felicity closed the shop and climbed the narrow stairs to her room. She changed from her work dress into her riding skirt, a practical garment of dark blue wool that her mother had sewn before succumbing to scarlet fever 7 years ago. Felicity pinned her hair more securely, grabbed her sunbonnet, and retrieved the small leather purse that held her carefully saved coins. The livery stable was 3 buildings down from her bakery. Samuel, the stable hand, had already fed and watered Daisy, her father's sorrel mare. The horse nickered in recognition as Felicity approached. "Going somewhere, Miss Kane?" Samuel asked, leading Daisy from her stall. "The McAllister Ranch. I need to be back before dark." Samuel's weathered face creased with concern. "That is a fair ride in this heat. You take plenty of water and mind the arroyo halfway there. Flash floods have been common this year, even when it looks clear." Felicity accepted his help mounting, settling into the side saddle with practiced ease. Her father had taught her to ride when she was barely tall enough to reach the stirrups, back when her mother was alive, and the bakery had been a family enterprise rather than a solitary burden. The road out of Wallace was well traveled, packed earth that showed the tracks of countless wagons and horses. The town fell away behind her, replaced by the stark beauty of the New Mexico landscape. Juniper and piñon dotted the rolling terrain, and in the distance, mountains rose like purple shadows against the brilliant blue sky. The sun beat down relentlessly, and Felicity was grateful for her bonnet. She passed several smaller ranches and homesteads, each marked by windmills and corrals. Cattle grazed in small groups, seeking shade beneath the scattered trees. The road forked at a large cottonwood, and Felicity took the western route as Samuel had instructed. The land began to change, becoming more verdant as she approached the river valley. Here, the grass grew thick and green, fed by irrigation ditches that channeled water from the river. This was McAllister land. The ranch house came into view as she crested a low rise. It was larger than she had anticipated, a sprawling structure of adobe and timber with a deep covered porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Several outbuildings clustered nearby. A massive barn, a bunkhouse, storage sheds, and corrals that held dozens of horses. Men moved about their work, and the sounds of hammering and cattle lowing carried on the dry air. Felicity's courage nearly failed her. This was a working ranch, a man's domain of hard labor and harder men. What business did a baker have here, asking favors of a cattle baron? But then she thought of the orders she had promised to fill, of the money she needed to survive another month, and she urged Daisy forward down the slope toward the ranch house. A man emerged from the barn as she approached, his weathered face splitting into a gap-toothed grin. "Help you, miss?" "I am here to see Mr. McAllister if he is available. My name is Felicity Kane. I own the bakery in Wallace. I will fetch him. You can water your horse at the trough yonder." The man gestured toward a water trough beneath a shade structure before disappearing into the barn. Felicity dismounted, her legs slightly stiff from the ride. She led Daisy to the trough and loosened the girth while the mare drank deeply. The ranch yard was immaculately maintained, she noticed. Tools hung in their proper places. The corrals were well built with sturdy posts and rails, and even the dirt had been recently swept clear of debris. This was the work of a man who took pride in his holdings. "Miss Kane." The voice came from behind her, deep and steady. Felicity turned and found herself face to face with Owen McAllister. He was taller than she had realized, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that came from years of physical labor. His face was tanned and weathered, with lines around his eyes that spoke of squinting into distant horizons. Those eyes were a striking shade of gray-blue, like storm clouds over the mountains. His dark hair needed a trim, curling slightly at his collar beneath his work-worn hat. He was perhaps 30 years old, though the sun and wind made it difficult to judge with certainty. "Mr. McAllister." "Thank you for seeing me. I apologize for arriving unannounced." Felicity found her voice steadier than she felt. "We do not stand much on ceremony out here." He removed his hat, revealing more of that unruly dark hair. "What brings you 8 miles from town in this heat?" "A matter of some urgency, I am afraid." Felicity straightened her shoulders, meeting his gaze directly. "I own the bakery in Wallace. My father, Thomas Kane, established it 12 years ago. Perhaps you knew him. I met him once or twice. Good man, I was sorry to hear of his passing." Owen's expression softened slightly. "But that does not explain your visit. I have run out of molasses. The general store will not receive a shipment for 3 weeks, and I have orders I must fill. Mrs. Henderson mentioned that you maintain a well-stocked supply house and sometimes have goods that are not readily available in town. I was hoping I might purchase molasses from you, if you have any to spare." Owen was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those storm cloud eyes. Felicity resisted the urge to fidget, to fill the silence with nervous chatter. Finally, he settled his hat back on his head and nodded toward the house. "Come inside out of the sun. We will discuss terms." The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly cool, thick adobe walls keeping the heat at bay. The main room was large and sparsely furnished with handmade furniture that showed quality craftsmanship. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and windows on two sides let in filtered light. Everything was clean and orderly if somewhat austere. "Sit down." Owen gestured to a chair at a solid oak table. "Would you like water? Coffee? Water would be lovely, thank you." He disappeared into what must have been the kitchen and returned with 2 glasses and a ceramic pitcher beaded with condensation. The water was cold and clean, and Felicity drank gratefully. Owen sat across from her, his large frame making the sturdy chair look almost delicate. "How much molasses do you need?" 2 gallons would see me through until the shipment arrives. 3 would be better, allowing me some reserve. "I have molasses in my supply house. Good quality from a Texas merchant I trust. But I am curious, Miss Kane. Why come all the way out here instead of adjusting your offerings for a few weeks? Surely you could bake other goods that do not require molasses." It was a fair question, and Felicity appreciated that he asked it directly rather than dancing around the issue. "I could, and normally I would. But I have specific orders for the church social tomorrow, including molasses cookies that Reverend Thompson specifically requested. Beyond that, molasses is essential for several of my most popular items: my morning buns, my dark bread, my ginger cakes. These are what bring customers into my shop regularly. If I cannot provide them for 3 weeks, those customers may find alternatives. Once lost, regular customers are difficult to regain." Owen nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "You are running a business, not just baking for pleasure." "Yes, the bakery is my livelihood. Since my father died, it is my only means of support. And you have no other family, no one to help shoulder the burden." "No. My mother died 7 years ago. I have an aunt in St. Louis, but we have not corresponded in years." Felicity set her glass down carefully, meeting Owen's gaze. "I understand I am asking a favor, Mr. McAllister. I am prepared to pay fair market price, plus extra for your trouble, and for the inconvenience of my unannounced visit." Owen leaned back in his chair, and for the first time, something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "You have sand, Miss Kane. I will give you that. Most women would have sent a man to do the asking. I have no man to send, and it is my responsibility, my business. I see no reason to hide behind a proxy." "No, I suppose you do not." Owen stood, and Felicity rose with him. "Come with me to the supply house. We will see what we can arrange." They walked across the ranch yard, and Felicity was aware of the curious glances from the ranch hands going about their work. A woman was evidently an unusual sight here. The supply house was a large, well-built structure with thick walls and a heavy door. Inside, it was dim and cool, shelves lining the walls from floor to ceiling. Sacks of flour and grain were stacked neatly, along with crates, barrels, and boxes labeled in a precise hand. Owen led her to a section where several barrels stood, each marked with its contents. He selected one marked molasses, grade A, and pried off the lid. The rich, dark scent wafted up, and Felicity could immediately tell it was good quality, better even than what the general store typically carried. "This is excellent," she said, unable to keep the pleasure from her voice. "Your Texas merchant has good taste. He supplies several large operations. I order in bulk and save on the cost." Owen replaced the lid. "How did you get here? I did not see a wagon. I rode. My mare is at the trough." "Then we have a problem." You cannot carry 3 gallons of molasses on horseback, not safely. The weight distribution would be wrong, and in this heat, it would be dangerous for the horse. Felicity's heart sank. She had been so focused on finding molasses that she had not considered the logistics of transporting it. Then I suppose I will have to return with a wagon, though I do not know when I could arrange that. I have a better solution. Owen moved toward the door. I need to go into Wallace tomorrow anyway to settle accounts at the bank. I will bring your molasses then, deliver it to your bakery. No extra charge for delivery. That is very generous, but tomorrow is Saturday. Do you not need to be here managing the ranch? My foreman is more than capable. And frankly, Miss Kane, I could use a few of those molasses cookies Mrs. Henderson was talking about. Call it payment for the delivery. Felicity felt a smile tugging at her lips. That seems an unequal exchange. Surely cookies are worth far less than a delivery from 8 miles away. Depends on the cookies. There it was again, that brief flicker of something warmer in his expression. And perhaps I am motivated by curiosity. I have heard you are the best baker in the territory, but I have never sampled your goods. Then I will make certain you are not disappointed. Felicity felt an unexpected lightness in her chest. What time should I expect you? Morning, around 9 o'clock. Early enough that the heat will not be too severe. They walked back toward the house, and Felicity noticed the sun had moved considerably since her arrival. I should start back before it gets much later. You will do no such thing. Owen's tone was firm. It is past midday, you have had a long, hot ride, and the return journey will be just as taxing. You will have lunch, rest for an hour, and then I will have one of my men escort you back to town. Mr. McAllister, I cannot impose further on your hospitality. It is not an imposition. It is common sense and common courtesy. My mother raised me better than to send a woman off across 8 miles of open country in the heat of the afternoon without proper rest and food. The mention of his mother sparked Felicity's curiosity, but before she could respond, a bell rang from somewhere behind the house. Owen glanced in that direction. That is the dinner bell. The men eat at midday in summer to avoid the worst heat. You will join us. Join your ranch hands. Mr. McAllister, I do not think that would be appropriate. Why not? You are a businesswoman seeking to conduct commerce. That makes you as entitled to a meal as any of my hands. Besides, you will sit with me. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. There was steel beneath the polite words, and Felicity realized that Owen McAllister was a man accustomed to making decisions and having them obeyed. But there was also genuine concern in his offer, a desire to ensure she was properly cared for before undertaking the return journey. Very well. Thank you. The dining area was a long, covered porch behind the main house, open on 3 sides to catch any breeze. A series of tables with benches could seat 40 men easily. A separate, smaller table sat at one end, slightly apart. Owen led her there. The ranch hands filed in, their conversations dying as they noticed Felicity. 30 pairs of eyes studied her with varying degrees of curiosity, surprise, and caution. Owen's presence beside her seemed to settle any potential objections before they could be voiced. Gentlemen, this is Miss Felicity Kane from Wallace. She owns the bakery. Miss Kane, these are my men. A few hats were removed, a few nods given. Then a large Mexican man with a ready smile stepped forward. It is a pleasure, Miss Kane. I am Miguel Rodriguez, foreman here. Your father made the finest sourdough I have ever tasted. I was sorry to hear of his passing. Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. That is kind of you to say. Miguel's presence seemed to break the ice, and several other men offered greetings before settling at the long tables. A Chinese man and a younger boy, probably his son, began bringing food from the kitchen. Platters of beef, beans, cornbread, and vegetables. The cooking smells were wonderful, and Felicity realized she had eaten nothing since a hasty breakfast before dawn. Owen served her before filling his own plate. The food was simple but well prepared and plentiful. As they ate, he asked about her bakery, her recipes, her process. Felicity found herself relaxing, talking about the work she loved. "My father taught me everything," she said, spreading butter on a piece of cornbread. "He learned baking in Chicago before coming west. He believed that even on the frontier, people deserved good bread, proper pastries. He said that civilization was not just law and order, but small comforts that reminded people they were more than just survivors. Your father was a wise man." Owen's voice carried genuine respect. "It is the same with ranching. We could survive on salt pork and hardtack, but why should we? Good food is one of the things that makes hard work bearable. Is that why your cook is so skilled?" Lai Chen is not just skilled, he is an artist. He worked in a San Francisco hotel before coming here. His son, Wai, is learning from him. Owen glanced toward where Lai Chen was supervising the serving. "I pay them both fair wages, treat them with respect. In return, they provide excellent work. It is a simple equation, but many seem unable to grasp it." Felicity heard the underlying message. Owen McAllister was a man who judged people on their merit, not their origins. In a time and place where Chinese workers were often exploited and abused, this spoke well of his character. After lunch, Owen insisted she rest in the parlor while he attended to ranch business. The comfortable chair and the day's exertion combined to pull her into a light doze. She woke to find the shadows lengthening and Owen standing in the doorway. "I apologize for letting you sleep so long, but you clearly needed the rest. It is time to start back if you want to reach Wallace before dark." A young ranch hand named Billy had been assigned to escort her. He was perhaps 19, with an eager manner and a tendency to chatter. They set out with Daisy fresh from rest and water, and Billy kept up a steady stream of conversation about the ranch, the cattle, and life in general. "Mr. McAllister is a fair boss," Billy said as they rode. "Pays on time, does not ask us to do anything he would not do himself. Worked beside us all last spring during the branding. Some bosses just sit on their horses and give orders, but not him." "How long have you worked for him?" 2 years now. I was just 17 when I signed on, green as grass. He took a chance on me, taught me proper cowhand work. I owe him a lot." They reached Wallace just as the sun was touching the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Billy saw her safely to the livery stable before tipping his hat and turning back toward the ranch. Felicity climbed the stairs to her room, tired but satisfied. She had secured the molasses she needed and more. She had met Owen McAllister. The man had surprised her. She had expected gruffness, perhaps even rudeness. Instead, she had found courtesy, intelligence, and an unexpected kindness. She lay in bed that night, watching moonlight stream through her window, and found herself wondering about the rancher. What had brought him to New Mexico territory? Why had he chosen such a solitary existence? And why did her thoughts keep returning to the way his eyes had softened when he talked about his mother, or the firm gentleness with which he had ensured she was properly fed and rested before her return journey? The next morning, Felicity was up before dawn. She had work to do. The yeast dough she had prepared the previous evening had risen overnight, and she shaped it into loaves before preparing her pie crusts. Without molasses, she had adjusted the church social order, but she wanted everything else perfect so Owen would arrive to a bakery operating at its peak. At 8:30, she changed from her work dress into a fresh day dress of green calico, repinned her hair, and made certain the shop was immaculate. The front window display showed her best goods: cinnamon rolls with cream cheese frosting, fruit tarts glistening with glaze, dinner rolls golden and perfect. Owen arrived at precisely 9 o'clock, driving a wagon with 3 large glass jars nestled in straw in the back. Each jar held a gallon of molasses, and seeing them, Felicity felt relief flood through her. "Good morning, Mr. McAllister." She held the door open as he carefully carried the first jar inside. "Miss Kane, where would you like these?" "In the back room, please, through that door." He made 3 trips, handling the heavy jars with ease. When the last was safely stored, Felicity pulled out her purse. "What do I owe you?" Owen named a price that was exactly what the general store charged, nothing more despite the superior quality. Felicity counted out the coins and added several extra. "For the delivery," she said when he started to protest. "We agreed on cookies. And you shall have them. But the delivery service is worth cash payment. I insist." They stood facing each other in the small back room, and Felicity was suddenly very aware of his height, the breadth of his shoulders, the way he had to duck slightly beneath the door frame. His presence seemed to fill the space. "You are a stubborn woman, Miss Kane." "I am a fair woman, Mr. McAllister. There is a difference." He took the extra coins, his calloused fingers briefly brushing hers. "Then I will accept with thanks. Now about those cookies. Come with me." She led him back into the main shop and filled a large box with an assortment of goods: molasses cookies left from her previous batch, cinnamon rolls, apple tarts, and a small loaf of her father's sourdough bread. Owen watched with growing amusement. "Miss Kane, this is far too much. Consider it a sampling menu. You said you had never tried my baking. Now you can determine your favorites. This must be worth 5 times what I charged for the molasses. Then we are even, because your molasses is worth at least twice what you charged me." Felicity tied the box with string and handed it to him. "I hope you enjoy them." Owen accepted the box, shaking his head with what looked like genuine bewilderment. "You are either the worst businesswoman in the territory or the cleverest. I have not decided which." "Perhaps I simply understand that goodwill and quality create lasting customer relationships." Felicity smiled. "Thank you again, Mr. McAllister. You have quite literally saved my business." "Owen, if we are going to be trading goods and arguing about fair payment, you might as well call me Owen." "Then you must call me Felicity." He nodded, adjusting his hat. "Felicity, I hope the church social goes well." After he left, Felicity immediately began preparing the molasses cookies for the social. The work was familiar and soothing, her hands moving through the steps her father had taught her years ago. Mix the molasses with butter and brown sugar, add the eggs and spices, fold in the flour. Roll the dough, cut the shapes, bake until the edges just begin to crisp while the centers remain soft. The church social that evening was a success. Reverend Thompson praised her cookies effusively, and several women asked for special orders. Felicity took notes, calculated quantities, and felt the familiar satisfaction of work well done. It was 3 days later when she saw Owen again. She was arranging fresh bread in the window display when his wagon pulled up outside. Her heart gave an odd little jump that she told herself was simply surprise. He entered the shop with the empty jars. "I thought you might need these back." "Thank you. That was very thoughtful." Felicity took the jars, noting they had been washed clean. "How did you enjoy the baking?" "I have a problem." Her heart sank. "Oh, what sort of problem?" "I ate everything in 2 days. The cinnamon rolls in particular are dangerous. I may need a regular supply to avoid going through withdrawal." Relief and amusement washed over her. "I believe that can be arranged." "Would you like to place an order?" "I would, but there is something else." Owen removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "I was wondering if you would have dinner with me. There is a restaurant in town, the Silver Creek. They serve decent food, and it would give us a chance to discuss a possible business arrangement." Felicity's pulse quickened. "What sort of business arrangement?" "I was thinking you could supply baked goods for the ranch. My men would appreciate fresh bread and pastries on a regular basis, and it would ensure you have a steady customer even when individual orders are slow. But I would like to discuss the details over dinner, if you are willing." It was a sensible business proposition, one that would indeed provide financial security. But looking at Owen, seeing the careful way he held himself, the slight uncertainty in his eyes, Felicity suspected business was not the only item on his agenda. "I would be happy to have dinner with you, Owen. When did you have in mind? Tomorrow evening? I could pick you up at 6 o'clock. That would be perfect." After he left, Felicity found herself humming as she worked, and it was not until Mrs. Henderson came in for her usual order that she realized she had been doing so for nearly an hour. "Someone is in good spirits," Mrs. Henderson observed with a knowing smile. "It is a lovely day. It is scorching hot, my dear, but I am pleased to see you happy." Mrs. Henderson accepted her wrapped loaf. "I heard Owen McAllister was here, twice in 1 week. Most people do not see him more than twice in a year. He delivered the molasses I needed, and today he returned the jars. We are also discussing a business arrangement." "Business?" "Yes, of course." Mrs. Henderson's smile widened. "Well, Owen McAllister is a good man, a bit solitary but good-hearted. He needs someone to draw him out, make that big ranch house a home instead of just a place to sleep between work days." After Mrs. Henderson departed, Felicity tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting to the next evening. What did one wear to dinner with a rancher? What did they talk about beyond business? And why did the thought of seeing Owen again make her feel like a girl of 18 instead of a woman of 22 running her own business? She settled on her best dress, a deep blue silk that her mother had made for special occasions. It was simple but well cut, and the color brought out the amber flecks in her hazel eyes. She arranged her hair in a soft style, with loose curls framing her face, and added her mother's pearl earrings. Owen arrived exactly at 6, dressed in clean dark trousers, a white shirt, and a vest. He had shaved and his hair had been trimmed. He looked uncomfortable in the formal clothing, but his eyes widened when he saw Felicity. "You look beautiful." "Thank you. You look very handsome yourself." The Silver Creek restaurant was the finest establishment in Wallace, with white tablecloths and real china. The owner, a German immigrant named Klaus Werner, greeted them personally and showed them to a quiet table near the window. After they ordered, Owen leaned back in his chair, studying Felicity with those storm cloud eyes. "Tell me about yourself, not the baker, the woman. Where did you come from before Wallace?" "I was born in Chicago. My father had a bakery there, a small shop in a German neighborhood. My mother worked beside him, and I grew up playing among the flour sacks and learning recipes. When I was 12, my father decided to come west. He said there was opportunity in the territories, room to grow. We settled here in Wallace, and he established the bakery." "And your mother?" "She never really took to the frontier. She missed Chicago, the culture, the society. When the scarlet fever came through 7 years ago, she did not have the strength to fight it." Felicity took a sip of water, the old grief surfacing briefly. I think part of her had stopped wanting to survive. Owen reached across the table and covered her hand with his. The gesture was simple but comforting. "I am sorry, that must have been difficult." "It was. But my father and I carried on. We had the bakery, we had each other. It was enough." She turned her hand over, briefly squeezing his before pulling back. "What about you? How did you come to own the largest ranch in the territory?" Owen was quiet for a moment, and Felicity wondered if she had overstepped. But then he began to speak, his voice low and measured. "I grew up in Kansas on a small farm. My father died when I was 14, leaving my mother, my sister, and me to manage alone. We tried, but the debt was crushing. When I was 18, I left to find work, promising to send money. I worked cattle drives, hired myself out as a cowhand, saved every penny. By the time I was 23, I had enough to pay off the farm debt and set my mother and sister up comfortably. My sister married well, a merchant in Topeka. My mother lives with them now. But you did not stay." "No." "I realized I was good at ranching, good at managing men and cattle and land. I heard about opportunities in New Mexico territory, came down and found this valley. The original owner was giving up, heading back east. I made him a fair offer and he accepted. That was 5 years ago." The food arrived, and they ate while continuing to talk. Owen told her about building the ranch, about the challenges of weather and market prices, and managing a large operation. Felicity talked about developing new recipes, about the satisfaction of creating something with her own hands that brought pleasure to others. It was only when Klaus came to their table apologizing for the late hour that they realized nearly 3 hours had passed. The restaurant was empty except for them. Owen paid the bill despite Felicity's protest and walked her back to her bakery. The summer evening was warm and stars blazed overhead in the clear desert sky. "Thank you for dinner," Felicity said as they reached her door. "I enjoyed it very much." "So did I, more than I can say." Owen hesitated, then said, "Would you like to see the ranch again? Come for dinner on Sunday. I could show you around properly and we could discuss the business arrangement." "I would like that." He smiled, a full, genuine smile that transformed his face. "Good. I will pick you up at noon. Bring a riding skirt if you have one. The best way to see the ranch is on horseback." Sunday dawned clear and hot. Felicity dressed in her riding skirt and a practical blouse, packed a small bag with a fresh dress in case she stayed later, and waited with mounting anticipation for noon. Owen arrived in his wagon, and the drive to the ranch was filled with easy conversation. Felicity found herself relaxing in his presence, the silences comfortable rather than awkward. At the ranch, Owen helped her down from the wagon, his hands steady at her waist. "First, let me introduce you properly to everyone." He led her to the barn where Miguel was overseeing the shoeing of several horses. The foreman greeted Felicity warmly, and soon other ranch hands were stopping by to say hello. She met Billy again, along with men of various ages and backgrounds, Mexicans, Americans, even a former slave named Jacob who had come west after the war seeking a fresh start. "We are all just men here," Owen said as they walked toward the corrals. "I do not care where someone came from or what their past holds. I care whether they do good work and treat others with respect. That is a rare attitude. It is a practical one. Good men are valuable, regardless of their origins. I learned that on the cattle drives. You share hardship and danger with someone. You stop caring about anything except whether they will stand beside you when things get difficult." He saddled 2 horses, a gentle mare for Felicity and a large gelding for himself. They rode out across the rangeland, and Owen pointed out features of the ranch. The irrigation system he had installed, the breeding stock he was developing, the line camps where men stayed during roundup. "This is beautiful," Felicity said, reining in her mare on a rise overlooking the river valley. Below, cattle grazed contentedly, and the mountains rose purple in the distance. "You have built something remarkable here. I have been fortunate, but it is lonely." The admission seemed to surprise him as much as it did Felicity. I have men who work for me, but no one to share the ranch with, no one to come home to at the end of the day. I did not realize how much that mattered until recently. What changed recently? Owen turned in his saddle to face her, and his eyes were intense. I met a woman who needed molasses, a woman who rides 8 miles alone to solve her problems, a woman who argues about fair payment and fills boxes with more baked goods than any sane person would trade for a delivery service. A woman who makes me think about more than cattle and land prices. Felicity's breath caught in her throat. Owen, I know I am not much for words. I am better with actions, but I need you to know that this is not just about business. Yes, I would like to buy baked goods from you regularly. But more than that, I would like to spend time with you. Get to know you better. See where this might lead. The sun beat down. A hawk circled overhead, and Felicity felt her life balanced on the edge of a decision. She could retreat to the safety of business arrangements and polite distance. Or she could be honest about the pull she felt toward this quiet, solid man. I would like that too, she said softly. Very much. They rode back to the ranch in companionable silence, but everything had shifted. When Owen helped her dismount, his hands lingered at her waist. When their eyes met over dinner, something warm and promising passed between them. Lai Chen had prepared a special meal, and they ate in the main house rather than with the hands. Afterward, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Tell me about your sister, Felicity said. You mentioned her earlier. Sarah. She is 2 years younger than me, married to a good man named Thomas Mitchell. They have 3 children now and another on the way. She writes me regularly, tells me I am wasting my life out here alone. Says I need to find a good woman and settle down properly. And what do you say to that? I tell her I am busy running a ranch, but truthfully I have been lonely. I just did not know what to do about it. He turned to look at Felicity. I am not a man who knows how to court properly. I have never been good with smooth words or romantic gestures. I do not need smooth words, Owen. I need honesty, and you have given me that. Then, honestly, Felicity, I would like to keep seeing you, take you to dinner again, come into town more often. Let this grow into whatever it is meant to become. I would like that too. The next several weeks fell into a pattern. Owen came into Wallace twice a week, ostensibly to pick up baked goods for the ranch, but really to see Felicity. They had dinner together, took walks in the early evening when the heat had lessened, talked about everything and nothing. Felicity learned that Owen loved to read, that his small library included Shakespeare and Dickens alongside practical ranching manuals. Owen discovered that Felicity had a beautiful singing voice and loved music, though Wallace had no piano or church organ. On Sundays, Felicity went to the ranch. She learned to help with small tasks, collected eggs from the chickens, helped Lai Chen with food preparation, and spent hours riding with Owen across his land. The ranch hands accepted her presence with good humor. Miguel's wife, Rosa, who lived in town but visited the ranch regularly to do laundry and mending, befriended Felicity immediately. It is good to see Owen happy, Rosa said one afternoon as they hung sheets to dry. He is a good man, but he has been alone too long. A big house like that needs a family, children's laughter. We have only been courting for 6 weeks, Rosa. Some things you just know. Owen knows. I can see it in how he looks at you, and unless I am very wrong, you know too. Felicity could not deny it. Somewhere between the Molasses delivery and now, she had fallen in love with Owen McAllister. She loved his quiet strength, his fairness, the way he treated everyone with respect regardless of their station. She loved his rare smiles and rarer laughter, which she was learning to coax out more frequently. She loved his hands, calloused from work but gentle when they touched her. She loved the life he was building and could imagine herself as part of it. One Sunday in late August, after they had been courting for 2 months, Owen took her to a line camp high in the hills. It was a small cabin with a spectacular view of the entire valley, maintained for use during spring and fall roundups. "This is my favorite place on the ranch," Owen said as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "When I need to think, I come here. I can see why. It is beautiful." Owen took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Felicity, I need to tell you something. I am not good at this, so forgive me if I stumble. Just say what is in your heart. I love you. I have loved you since you sat in my ranch house and argued with me about fair payment. Maybe even since you rode up to my barn looking determined and terrified at the same time. I know it is fast, maybe too fast, but I am 30 years old and I know my own mind. I love you and I want you in my life, not just as a visitor on Sundays, but always. I want to marry you if you will have me. I want to share this ranch with you, build a real home, have children together. I want to wake up beside you every morning for the rest of my life." Felicity felt tears pricking her eyes, but they were tears of joy. "I love you too, Owen. I have been afraid to say it, afraid it was too soon, too much. But I love you. Yes, I will marry you. Yes, I want all of those things." Owen pulled her into his arms, and his kiss was everything she had imagined and more, tender and passionate, full of promise and hope. "When?" he asked when they finally broke apart. "As soon as possible. I do not want to wait." "Neither do I, but there are practical considerations. Your bakery. We need to decide what to do about it." They talked long into the evening, making plans. Felicity would keep the bakery, at least initially. She loved her work and was not ready to give it up. Owen would hire someone to help with transportation, bringing her to the ranch on Sundays and bringing baked goods to the ranch during the week. Eventually, if she wanted, she could sell the bakery or hire a manager, but that decision could wait. "I want you to be happy," Owen said firmly. "The bakery is important to you. We will find a way to make it work." They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church in Wallace. Reverend Thompson presided, and it seemed the entire town attended. Miguel stood up as Owen's best man, and Rosa served as Felicity's attendant. Sarah Mitchell even traveled from Kansas with her family, bringing Owen's mother, a sweet-faced woman who embraced Felicity warmly. "I am so glad Owen found you," Mrs. McAllister said. "He has always been too serious, too focused on work. You make him smile." "He makes me smile too." The wedding was simple but joyful. Felicity wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her. Owen wore a new suit that made him look uncomfortable but handsome. When they exchanged vows, his voice was steady and sure, and when he kissed her as his wife, the room erupted in applause. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up under the shade trees. Lai Chen had outdone himself with the food, and Felicity had baked a massive wedding cake with 5 tiers. Music was provided by several ranch hands who proved surprisingly talented with fiddle and guitar. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, Owen led Felicity onto the makeshift dance floor. She had not known he could dance, but he moved with the same quiet competence he brought to everything. "Happy?" he asked, pulling her close. "Happier than I knew I could be." "Good. Because I plan to spend the rest of my life making you even happier." Their wedding night was tender and passionate, a discovery of each other that left them both breathless. Felicity had worried she might feel nervous or awkward, but with Owen, everything felt natural and right. The next morning, she woke to find him propped on one elbow, watching her with such love in his eyes that it took her breath away. "Good morning, Mrs. McAllister." "Good morning, husband." They spent a week at the ranch, a brief honeymoon where Owen delegated his responsibilities and devoted himself entirely to his new wife. They rode across the rangeland, picnicked by the river, and spent long evenings talking and making love, but real life could not be held at bay forever. Felicity had a bakery to run, orders to fill. They worked out a schedule. She would stay in town Monday through Wednesday, working at the bakery and living in her small room. Owen would visit Tuesday evening, staying overnight and helping load supplies Wednesday morning. Wednesday afternoon through Sunday, she would be at the ranch. It was not perfect, and Felicity missed Owen terribly during those nights in town. But it worked. The bakery continued to thrive, now with the added prestige of being owned by Mrs. Owen McAllister. And the ranch prospered under Owen's careful management. In November, Felicity realized she had missed her monthly course. She waited another week to be certain before telling Owen. She found him in the barn, examining a horse's hoof. "Owen, could you spare a moment?" He set down the horse's leg and turned to her, immediately sensing something important. "What is it? Is everything all right?" "Everything is wonderful. We are going to have a baby." For a long moment, Owen just stared at her. Then he crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and swept her into his arms, spinning her around. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." His voice was thick with emotion. "When? Early summer, I think. June or July." He set her down carefully as if she might break. "Should you be working at the bakery? Is it safe? Should you be lifting things?" Felicity laughed at his sudden anxiety. "I am pregnant, not ill. Women have been having babies while continuing their work since the beginning of time. I will be fine." But as her pregnancy progressed, the long hours at the bakery became more difficult. The heat of the ovens left her exhausted, and the smell of baking bread, which she had always loved, began to turn her stomach in the early weeks. In January, she made a difficult decision. "I want to sell the bakery." They were sitting by the fire in the ranch house, and Owen looked up in surprise. "Are you certain? I know how much it means to you." "It does mean a great deal to me. It was my father's legacy, my mother's memory. But I've come to realize that the true legacy is not the building or even the business. It is the skill, the knowledge, the love of baking that they taught me. I can carry that anywhere. And right now, I want to be here at the ranch, building a life with you. I want our children to grow up running through these rooms, learning to ride, feeling safe and loved. The bakery has served its purpose. It kept me afloat when I needed it, but I do not need it anymore. I have you, I have this ranch, I have our future." Owen pulled her close, and she could feel his heart beating against her cheek. "If you are certain, then we will sell it, but I want you to know that you are not giving up anything. You are choosing something, our life together, our family. I know, and I am at peace with it." They found a buyer quickly, a young couple from Colorado who wanted to start fresh in New Mexico. Felicity taught them her recipes, showed them her techniques, and in March, she handed over the keys and walked away. That evening, standing on the porch of the ranch house with Owen's arms around her and their baby moving inside her, Felicity felt no regret. This was where she belonged. Their son was born on a hot July afternoon. The birth was long and difficult, with only Rosa and a midwife from town to help. Owen paced outside, his face pale with worry, while inside Felicity labored and fought. When the baby finally arrived, his lusty cry brought tears of relief to everyone's eyes. Rosa carried him outside to Owen, who took his son with shaking hands. "You have a boy," Rosa said, smiling. "A strong, healthy boy, and Felicity is well, tired but well." Owen went inside to find his wife exhausted but smiling. "We have a son," he said, his voice breaking. "We do. What should we name him?" They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now, looking at his tiny son's face, Owen knew. "Thomas, for your father. Thomas Kane McAllister." "Thomas," Felicity repeated, tears streaming down her face. Papa would have been so proud. Thomas was a colicky baby who kept them up nights and tested their patience during the days. But he was also a joy, with Owen's blue-gray eyes and Felicity's auburn hair. Owen proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor at night, singing off-key lullabies, and showing surprising gentleness with such a tiny creature. "I never knew I could love something this much," he confessed one night, holding his sleeping son. "It terrifies me. What if something happens to him? Then we will face it together, but we cannot live in fear of what might happen. We have to trust that we will do our best, and that will be enough." As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, the ranch house came alive with laughter and noise. Felicity had worried about being isolated, but she found herself surrounded by an unexpected family. Rosa visited weekly, always with treats for Thomas. The ranch hands became doting uncles, carving toys and teaching the boy about horses. Lai Chen and his son Wei, who had become like family, delighted in feeding the growing boy. When Thomas was 2, Felicity discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1882 they welcomed a daughter, Ellen Marie, named for Felicity's mother. Ellen was a calm, happy baby, the opposite of her brother in temperament. She slept through the night almost immediately and greeted each morning with a smile. Thomas was fascinated by his little sister, bringing her toys and singing to her in the same off-key manner his father used. Owen's mother came to visit that summer, bringing Sarah and her family. The ranch house was full to bursting with children and laughter, and Owen's face reflected such contentment that Felicity felt her heart might burst. "You have made a good life here," Mrs. McAllister told Felicity one evening as they watched the children play. "I worried when Owen came west alone. I thought he might lose himself in work and isolation, but you have given him a real home, a family. You have given him joy." "He has given me the same," Felicity replied. "I thought my life was over when my father died, that the bakery was all I had left. But Owen showed me that life was just beginning." The years passed with the steady rhythm of ranch life. There were good years when cattle prices were high and rain fell when needed. There were hard years of drought and disease and market crashes. Through it all, Owen and Felicity faced challenges as a team. Thomas grew into a serious, responsible boy who loved the ranch and dreamed of running it someday. Ellen was more artistic, always drawing or singing, with a love of books that rivaled her father's. 2 more children joined the family. Another son, Samuel, born in 1884, and finally another daughter, Grace, born in 1886. The ranch house expanded to accommodate the growing family. Owen added a second story with proper bedrooms for the children, a larger kitchen, and even a parlor with a piano that Felicity had shipped from St. Louis as a surprise for Ellen's 7th birthday. On their 10th anniversary, Owen took Felicity back to the line camp where he had proposed. The children stayed at the ranch under Miguel and Rosa's watchful care, and for one night, Owen and Felicity were simply 2 people in love, not parents or ranchers or business owners. "You regret it?" Owen asked as they sat on the cabin porch watching the sunset. "Giving up the bakery?" "Your independence?" "Never. Not for one moment." Felicity leaned against his shoulder. "I gained so much more than I gave up. I have you, our children, this life. I still bake, you know. I teach our children my father's recipes, and Lai Chen and I experiment with new ones." The knowledge and skill were never lost. They just found a new expression. "You still make the best molasses cookies in the territory," she laughed. "You would say that even if I burned them. Maybe, but it would still be true." He pulled her close. "I love you, Felicity. More now than even on the day we married. You have made my life full in ways I never imagined possible. I love you too. You gave me sweetness beyond measure when I only asked for molasses." He kissed her then, and it held all the passion and promise of their first kiss, deepened and enriched by 10 years of shared life. The children grew. Thomas, at 16, was already running cattle operations with Miguel, proving himself a capable rancher. Ellen, at 14, was studying music and literature with a tutor Owen had hired from Santa Fe. Samuel, at 12, showed a gift for working with horses that amazed even the experienced hands. And Grace, at 10, was fearless and adventurous, always climbing trees or exploring the far reaches of the ranch. Owen expanded the ranch operations, diversifying into breeding horses as well as cattle. Felicity started a small business making preserves and baked goods that were shipped to Santa Fe and Albuquerque, building on her baking skills, but in a way that fit her life as a ranch wife and mother. In the evenings, the family gathered in the parlor. Ellen played piano while the others sang, and sometimes Owen would pull Felicity aside for a private waltz while the children giggled. These were the moments Felicity treasured most, the simple joy of family, of love grown deep through years of shared experience. When Thomas was 18, ready to take on more responsibility at the ranch, Owen made him a partner in the operation. "This will be yours someday," Owen told his son. "Yours and your siblings, but you have earned the right to help run it now." Thomas shook his father's hand with tears in his eyes. "I will not let you down, Papa. I know you will not. You are a better man at 18 than I was at 25. Ellen left for Boston when she was 19 to study music at a prestigious conservatory. The parting was bittersweet, but Felicity was proud of her daughter's independence and ambition. "She has your strength," Owen said as they watched the train pull away. "She will do great things." Samuel took over the horse breeding program, developing a reputation for quality stock that extended beyond New Mexico territory. And Grace, surprising everyone, showed an interest in medicine, studying with the doctor in Wallace and talking about attending medical school someday. Owen and Felicity grew older together, silver threading through his dark hair and hers, lines deepening around their eyes and mouths. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, tested and proven by time. On a spring evening in 1900, they sat on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sunset paint the sky. 22 years had passed since Felicity had ridden up to Owen's ranch desperately seeking molasses. "You remember the day we met?" Owen asked, taking her hand. "Every moment. I was so nervous, riding out here alone. I was certain you would turn me away. I am glad I did not. I am glad you needed molasses. I am glad for every moment that led to you sitting here beside me." Their children were grown now, building lives of their own while remaining connected to the ranch. Thomas and his wife lived in the new house Owen had built for them at the eastern edge of the property, raising their own children. Ellen had returned from Boston and married a lawyer in Santa Fe, visiting regularly with her husband and infant son. Samuel was engaged to a rancher's daughter from the next territory over, planning a wedding for the fall, and Grace was preparing to leave for medical school in Philadelphia. "We built something good," Felicity said softly. "Not just the ranch, but a family. Love that extends beyond just the two of us." "We did," Owen agreed. "And it all started because you needed molasses. You gave me so much more than molasses that day. You gave me a future, a home, a love I never dreamed possible." Owen lifted her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. "You gave me the same. Before you, I was just existing, working, building something without really understanding why. You gave my life meaning." As the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Owen and Felicity sat together in comfortable silence, hands intertwined. Behind them, the ranch house glowed with lamplight, ready for another evening, another day, another year of the life they had built together. The wind carried the scent of sage and juniper, the distant lowing of cattle settling for the night. Somewhere in the barn, horses nickered softly. A coyote called from the hills, and an owl answered from the cottonwood by the river. This was home. This was love. This was the sweetness that came from a simple request for molasses and a rancher's willingness to help a woman in need. "Come inside," Felicity said finally, standing and pulling Owen up with her. "Lai Chen is making dumplings for dinner, and Grace will want to tell us about her day at the doctor's office." Owen followed her into the house, into the warmth and light and continuing story of their life together. A life that had begun with molasses and grown into something sweeter than either could have imagined. In the years that followed, Owen and Felicity continued to thrive. The ranch became legendary in New Mexico, known not just for quality cattle and horses, but for fair treatment of workers and smart management. Thomas proved an even better rancher than his father, implementing new techniques and expanding operations carefully. Ellen's son grew up visiting the ranch every summer, falling in love with the land just as his mother had. Samuel's horse breeding program won awards across the territory and beyond. And Grace became the first female doctor in Wallace, opening a practice that served everyone regardless of their ability to pay. Owen's hair turned completely silver, and he slowed down, letting Thomas handle more of the daily operations. But he still rode the boundaries regularly, still knew every inch of his land. Felicity's hands showed the work of years, but they never lost their skill. She taught her grandchildren to bake, passing down recipes and techniques just as her father had taught her. They celebrated their 30th anniversary with all their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch. Thomas had arranged for a photographer to come from Santa Fe, and the entire family posed on the porch, 3 generations united by love and land. "Smile, Grandpa," Grace's daughter called, and Owen obliged, though his real smile was reserved for Felicity, standing beside him where she had stood for 3 decades. That evening, after everyone had eaten too much, and the grandchildren had finally been settled in various bedrooms throughout the house, Owen and Felicity slipped away to their room. It was the same room they had shared since their wedding night, though much had changed. The bed was softer now, accommodating aging bones. Photographs lined the walls, capturing moments from their years together. "Tired?" Owen asked, helping Felicity with the buttons on her dress, his fingers not as nimble as they once were but still gentle. A good tired. The kind that comes from a full heart, not exhaustion. She turned to face him, cupping his weathered face in her hands. "Have I told you today that I love you? Only 3 or 4 times, but I never tire of hearing it. I love you, Owen McAllister. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Felicity McAllister. You took a lonely rancher and gave him a life worth living." They held each other close, and outside the New Mexico night spread vast and star-filled, full of promise and peace. More years passed. Owen and Felicity grew old together, their love deepening with each season. They faced joys and sorrows, births and deaths, triumphs and setbacks. But through it all, they remained each other's constants, each other's home. On a spring morning in 1915, Felicity woke to find Owen had already risen. She found him in the kitchen, surprisingly, standing at the stove. "What are you doing?" she asked, laughing. "Making you breakfast, or trying to. I am not sure this is going well." He gestured at the eggs, which were definitely overdone, and the toast, which was bordering on burned. "It is perfect," Felicity said, kissing his cheek. Absolutely perfect. They ate breakfast together as the sun rose, painting the mountains pink and gold. Afterward, they walked slowly to the barn where Thomas was already working. "Morning, Mama, Papa," he called. "Beautiful day." "It is," Owen agreed. "I thought I would check on that new foal." "Papa, you do not need to do that. The hands are taking care of everything." "I know, but I want to. This ranch is still mine, at least partly, and I still love every inch of it." Thomas smiled and nodded, understanding. This land was in their blood, part of who they were. Age might slow them, but it would not take away that fundamental connection. That afternoon, Owen and Felicity sat in their favorite spot, a bench beneath an old cottonwood where they could see the entire valley spread before them. This was where they came when they needed to think, to talk, or simply to be together. "You ever wonder what your life would have been like if I had not had molasses that day?" Owen asked suddenly. Felicity considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. I suppose I would have managed somehow. Found another solution. But I would have been alone and my life would have been so much smaller, so much less joyful. I wonder too. I probably would have continued building my ranch, making money, growing the operation, but it would have been hollow, all that success, and no one to share it with. No children, no grandchildren, just land and cattle and loneliness. Then I am doubly glad I needed molasses that summer, and I am glad I had some to give." Owen squeezed her hand. "You asked for molasses, but I gave you my heart, and you gave me yours in return. Best trade I ever made." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the shadows lengthen across the valley. The ranch continued its busy operations around them, but here, in this moment, there was only peace and love and contentment. As evening fell and they slowly made their way back to the house for dinner, surrounded by family and warmth and laughter, both Owen and Felicity felt complete satisfaction with the life they had built. It had all started with a simple need for baking supplies. But that need had brought them together, and together they had created something far sweeter than any recipe could produce. A love that spanned decades, a family that would continue for generations, and a legacy of kindness, hard work, and devotion that would echo through the years. The molasses had been for baking, but the sweetness that came from their meeting had nourished their souls for a lifetime. And looking at Owen, at the life they had built, at their children and grandchildren gathered around the dinner table, Felicity knew with absolute certainty that she had found something far more precious than she had ever sought. She had found home. She had found love. She had found everything she had never known she needed, all because one summer day, a rancher had given sweetness beyond measure.